Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Hey, Comics fam, short and sweet here. We have a Patreon, so if you want to help us keep the lights on and spread the good word, you can drop a small tithe in the offering plate at Cryptid Creator Corner Pod over there. Membership starts at $1 per month, and we've got some great extra footage from the podcast dropping soon over there. Link in the show notes, and thank you for your continued support.
Thanks for your donation.
Do you love sci-fi? Are you a horror fan? Maybe you prefer action or fantasy. 2000 AD has it all and should be on your radar. With a whole universe of characters from Judge Dredd and Strontium Dog to Rogue Trooper, Shakara Halo Jones, and many more, every weekly issue you get 5 action-packed thrills from incredible creators such as Garth Ennis, Rob Williams, Alex DeCampi, Dan Abnett, and so many others. Get a print subscription and it'll arrive to your door every week. And your first issue is free, or subscribe digitally. Get free back issues and download DRM-free copies of every issue for just $9 a month. That's 128 pages of incredible comics every month for less than $10. That's like a whole graphic novel's worth. All subscribers get amazing offers like discount vouchers and exclusive product offers. Head to 2000ad.com and click on subscribe now, or download the 2000AD app. And why wait? Start reading today. I'll put links in the show notes for you.
Hello, and welcome to Comic Book Yeti's Cryptid Creator Corner. I'm one of your hosts, Jimmy Gasparo, and I have a very special guest on the podcast today that I was very excited. I think I reached out and asked them to come on the podcast because I just thought the idea behind their graphic novel was really cool. The art looked really fun, and I got to read it. They were kind enough to send me a copy, and it is great, and I cannot wait to talk about it, but please, welcome to the podcast, Johanna Taylor. Johanna, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Jimmy.
Yeah, I, uh, I don't know where I first saw I mean, somewhere on social media, I think I had first saw The Ghostkeeper, and I think it came out last July of 2024. Um,
Mhm.
right, so it's been out for a little while, and I hadn't it just, for whatever reason, didn't come across my radar, but as soon as I saw the cover for it and read kind of like the log line as to what it was about, I thought it sounded great, like just something that totally captured something that I would be into. And I mean it's really like a young adult, that age range, probably 12 and up or maybe even a little younger, but I was captivated by it. I thought it was so much fun and um great story, deals with kind of some heavy issues in terms of mental health, in terms of the main character, Dorian Leith, some of the other characters as well. But there's some important lessons there that folks of all ages would be wise to listen to. As I really kind of uh instantly, but when I got to the end, like understood the Dorian's idea of I have to take care of everybody, and um, he sometimes did not do a great job of taking care of himself. And I just turned 46 to tell you how old I am. Listeners of the podcast know that I'm an old man, but I was great for many years of talking to my friends about the benefits of going to therapy. And that if your arm I mean, I've probably said it thousands of times. If your arm was broken, you'd go to the doctor. So if
Mhm.
something, not that you're broken, but if something's going on that isn't clicking or working right or that you're struggling with, there's there should be no shame, just like nobody questions you if you go to the doctor to get your broken arm in a cast. You should go talk to a therapist. Find a therapist that works for you. There's a lot of different types of therapy, and for years, I put off going to a therapist myself. And I and
Honestly, same.
so but there's like a part in particular where Dorian was like, "I would tell all these ghosts that, like, you need to find rest." And I never once thought that to apply that same advice to anything Dorian was doing. So, um,
Mhm.
but not to talk around to talk around it. Let's get right into it. Why don't you, so they can hear from you, you tell listeners kind of what the Ghost Keeper is all about.
Yeah. So The Ghost Keeper is a Victorian YA fantasy, and it's about a guy, Dorian, who's just starting out. He is a therapist for ghosts. And so he goes from haunted house, and instead of exorcising the ghosts like you would expect, he sits the ghost down and asks them to talk about their feelings and just asks them, "Hey, why are you haunting this house? Or is there any unfinished business you have that I can help with?" And he helps them to kind of manage their emotions, accept the situation that they're in, the fact that they're dead, the fact that they need to move on, and he helps them to get rid of this ghostly rot that has been growing on the ghosts that feeds on their misery and their regret and their fears of moving on. And that prevents them from moving on to the next life and entering, limbo to get to death's door, which is where you go to get to the afterlife in the world of the Ghost Keeper. So he helps them out with that and tries to help cure the rot, and it starts to become very overwhelming very quickly because he is the only one who can see the ghosts. Everybody else who lives in the town, as far as he knows, can't see the ghosts, and so he feels extra pressure because he feels like he's the only person who can help them because he's the only person who's, like, who knows they're there, who knows what they're dealing with, who can communicate with them, and so he takes it upon himself to be that person and play that role for them, and it becomes something that really starts to progressively weigh him down and interfere with his relationships, interfere with his real life and his own mental health struggles. And so it's a story about learning how to set boundaries, learning how to take care of yourself as well as other people, and figuring out just a good work life balance without falling into burnout and what to do with burnout when you hit it.
Yeah, I mean, it hits all of those notes, and one thing I was thinking about, folks that take on a caregiver or a caretaker role, whether that is in their, their job or
Mhm.
in their family life. Eh, there's a couple of things that I think don't get talked about enough, and Dorian exemplifies almost all of them. I touched on it a little bit before, where he was great at giving out advice to try and help other people, but wouldn't apply the advice to himself. Um, he felt the other thing was that he felt, because he was the only one that could see the ghosts, as you said, he's the only one that could help them. But other people at times offered Torian help. And he's like, "No, I got this. I have to do it. I have to do it." And,
Mhm.
as I think probably everybody listening knows somebody in their life who it's tough to talk to them about because they do a lot, and it's part of their DNA that they can handle all of these things. But
Right.
sometimes it's not possible to do it all. And if somebody's offering you help, you don't wanna I think it almost comes from a sense, that they don't wanna burden this other person asking for help. But most people I think when they genuinely ask if they can help, they wanna help. They don't see it as a burden. But I know plenty of people in my life who try to do everything and feel like they're the only one that can do it. Um,
Right, and it almost becomes a point of pride. Like, that's how they derive worth in their own life is they try to be a resource for other people, and they try to help other people, and it creates a bit of a struggle because you can't absorb other people's problems. That's why they're other people's problems. And I think there's also a stigma still around going to therapy. It's gotten a lot better now, but I
oh,
think there's
I
also
agree.
yeah, there's a stigma around going to therapy because it tends to be interpreted as a, like, it's like a lapse in your, like, personal strength somehow, in a way that getting injured, physically injured, isn't quite interpreted. So people, if they hear you going to therapy, their immediate thought is like, "Oh, well, what's wrong with you? Like, what?" Are you having mental issues that would, and it creates, like, all these character judgments that kind of happen unconsciously, and I feel like a lot of people tend to get really spooked by having that vulnerability to be like, "Hey, I have some struggles with my mental health," and to normalize that sort of talk, and so they try to appear stronger than they are and kind of work through that and keep it inside so that they don't burden other people. So it's like it's equal parts a pride issue and also feeling like you just can't put that on other people, like wanting to spare other people that pain and that burden by handling it on your own.
Yeah. I mean, I no, I definitely think that makes, a lot of sense, and,
Mhm.
yeah, even, when I said I would tell people, like, all the time, "Hey, why don't you talk to somebody? Find somebody, find a professional, sit down, talk to them, whatever the issue was. This sounds like it is gonna take more than, like, having a beer at a bar and talking to your friends about. Like, you might need
Right.
somebody else to, like, a professional to weigh in."
Though that
And,
can help.
it can, no, definitely, talking to your friends, talking to
Yeah.
somebody can help, but
Mhm.
sometimes even with, even if you're not, looking into, like, medication, like, talk therapy with a professional, extraordinarily helpful, and
Mhm.
but, but there is still, like, you wouldn't, I have to leave work at 1 o'clock to go to a doctor's appointment. People don't, like, bat an eye for something, but they're still
Right.
like, "Oh, I'm not gonna say I'm leaving, or I have a therapy appointment," you know?
Mhm.
And so I've tried to do better about that, and, and to say, "Well, just telling other people, or saying, like, therapy's, um, helpful, and there
Right.
shouldn't be a stigma surrounding it," but then, acting like it's a secret if you go to therapy. I'm like, "No, I go to therapy." Like, it's just
Right,
like,
right.
I kinda have to live it. Be like, "No, I go to therapy. Like, I'm fine. I have
Yeah.
anxiety. I go to therapy. I talked to somebody about it." Past, 2 years, I don't wake up every morning, like, I used to call it the dread, just that feeling. Monday
Yeah.
mornings were the worst, just like that feeling of, as soon as I step out of bed, the day's gonna start. I don't
Right.
that happens so rare now, which is great for me,
Yeah,
you know,
that's
so
fantastic. And that's the tricky thing with mental health is because it's a little bit more invisible than a physical ailment, because if somebody's broken their arm, you can see the broken arm. If somebody's struggling with depression or anxiety or has, like, bipolar or borderline personality disorder, like, those kinds of things, like, they're not usually very visible, and that was part of what I use the rot that the ghosts suffer with and the existence of the ghosts themselves. Like, it's in the universe of the Ghostkeeper, everyone pretty much has accepted that ghosts are real and ghosts do exist. They're more just, like, a little freaked out, and they're kinda treated like vermin a little bit. It's just like, "Oh, a ghost haunting my house is treated with the same level of gravity as a raccoon infestation or, like, termites or whatever."
yeah.
And so they're more just like, "Oh, gross, get that out of my house." But why I utilized something like the gap between Dorian seeing the ghosts and other people seeing the ghosts and the ghostly rot, I wanted to communicate the invisibility of the manifestation of mental health issues because that is such a huge thing that caused people to kinda not take it very seriously, and that's comes through in the story in the sense that, like, Prudence Greaves in the beginning, she kind of is very dismissive, she's just like, "Okay, just do whatever you have to do, I don't really care how you do it, just get them out of my house." And it's not until things start to affect her directly that she starts to actually care about Dorian's methods, and that's really a huge factor in some people's reluctance to be open about their mental health because it is invisible. And so people tend to not really know how to take it and how to treat that sort of thing when you're talking about it just in candid conversation, because it's hard to relate to something that you can't really see on its face. Like a broken arm is like, oh, I can imagine what that's like. Either I've broken an arm or like somebody else, and you can see the arm in a cast. but there's not really a cast for your brain that is
Right.
visible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's done so like, you do it so smartly. It is
Thank
just
you.
done so well, uh, because all of that is captured within it, and it is still a really it's strange to say maybe, it's still a really fun, like, Victorian kind of ghost story, like, all the
Mhm.
characters are pretty fun, like, Dorian's great, Brody's great, Grant's got Gran I go back and forth on Gran, like, Gran, sometimes she's okay, sometimes she's a little selfish and,
Mhm.
but it again, the characters use very effectively to be able to talk about these things, going on, like, with Dorian, and really with all the characters in the story, and I really love I mean, you wrote it, you did all the art, Micah Myers lettered it, right?
Yes.
Micah? Yeah, I love Micah. Micah's awesome.
Micah's great.
I love the art style in it, the kind of little fungus floral design for the rot all came out. It looks really cool. It looks really sickly and sinister at times. Owen every time, I thought Owen was a fantastic design. He's kind of like a is he supposed? He's like an old ship captain, right? Or
Yeah, kind
yeah,
of kind of an old-timey, captainy, piratey feel.
yeah, definitely. I just thought all of that was great. I mean, I really love the whole I mean, I'm not an artist, but I read a lot of comics and graphic novels. I love the whole overall design of the book. Like, I just love how it read. I loved how it looked. I loved the choices you made in terms of, like, it's not always just like straight paneling. There's a lot of great stuff where, um, things are kind of like broken out. You have a couple of really interesting pages where we see Dorian kind of like visiting all the ghosts. Yeah, it looks really it's a really easy to read and it really looks like wonderful. Um, Loved all that stuff about it. I loved the design of the town, Rookwood. I thought all of that was like super fun, super cute. So yeah, kudos on all of the art stuff. I mean, it just is great.
Oh, thank you.
I don't really have a question. I that was just um it's so one
I'll
of the
take
things
it.
yeah, one of the things I want to talk about, I'm a big Oscar Wilde fan. So immediately when
Oh,
I can't you
fantastic.
you can't help
Mhm.
when a character's named Dorian and you're like, okay, well, immediately thinking of Dorian Gray, and then I'm like, "Okay, so there's gotta be some type of maybe some type of Oscar Wilde influence in here." And so then I think, I read when I was preparing for this that there was kinda some the Canterville Ghost influence, which,
Mhm.
I I always thought of the Canterville Ghost as like, um, uh, well, not really like early Scooby Doo, but that's what
It's
I've
kind
always
of yeah, it's kind of a goofy story. Like, in classic Oscar Wilde fashion, he doesn't really, like, give the situation the gravity it deserves
yeah,
because he's satirizing it, and he's just like, "Oh, what if haunting, but the ghost is, like, really bad at being a scary ghost,
right.
and nobody takes him seriously," and, Oscar Wilde is going to there's nothing he won't satirize. There's
Yeah,
nothing he won't just, like,
right.
take to the absolute heights of absurdity, and just in his dry wit way, and that was the part where I was just like it inspired the story, but I also felt like the ending of The Canterville Ghost was a little unsatisfying, and so I wanted to, like, kind of expand it and take it to the natural conclusion of just like, okay, what if there was a guy whose job it is to talk to the ghosts who are quote unquote bad at haunting and aren't necessarily sinister. They're just kind of people and they're freaking out. They are struggling to, maintain their emotions and struggling to cope with the situation that they're in, the fact that they're dead
Right.
and kind of in a little bit of denial, and then I also wanted to kind of take the idea that Oscar Wilde introduced with the ghost in Canterville Ghost moving on to the next life and just kind of thinking about, okay, what would that look like? What would that entail? And that was the early framework for the Ghost Keeper story, was very much that. But it's funny that you mentioned that because there are actually a handful of other Oscar Wilde Easter eggs
Oh, yeah.
throughout the book.
I'll have to go back and read it again,
Yeah.
and see if I pick up on any of them, but,
I can give you one right now. Muffin the cat. She's named after the fact that they eat muffins in Importance of Being Earnest. When
That's
it's like
fantastic.
anytime they have an emotional, like, "Oh no, I'm freaking out about something. I need to eat muffins about it."
Right. Oh,
And
man.
s and so I used Muffin as just kinda like, "Oh, she's the emotional support cat, and she's named after the
Yep.
emotional support muffins in in
I
Importance of Being
Importance of Being Ear
Earnest."
Oh, I
Yeah.
forgot that. I was in The Importance of Being Earnest, that's my favorite too.
Were you really?
Like, a community, not like, yeah, in commu I did theater in high school and college, and I did community theater after college for a little bit as something to do.
Oh, that
Um,
rules.
but yeah, so, that was I love The Importance of Being Earnest. That was probably, I don't know, 20 what year is it? 2025? Maybe 18 years ago? Yeah. So,
Wow.
um, but yeah, I was in it. I got to play Algernon, which is my favorite character, so
Oh, that's awesome. That's a fun
yeah.
role.
Yeah. It is,
Yeah.
no, it was 2005. It was 2005 when I was in it, so it was
Okay.
20 years ago. So 20 years ago, I was in The Importance of Being Earnest.
Wow.
So, yeah, but fun, great show, one of my favorites. So I will have to go
Yeah.
back and look to see if I can spot any other Oscar Wilde Easter eggs. That is because that's great.
Yeah, that's the main one that comes to mind in terms of, like, a little bit more textual, but there's
Mhm.
also a lot of influence in terms like, Brody, for example, I based Brody's design, like, with his hair and his silhouette, I based that off of photos of Oscar Wilde.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like,
That makes sense
especially
now.
the hair. I was just like,
And his
"That's"
glasses?
uh, I just threw the glasses on because I
Oh,
thought they
okay.
were adorable. Because he was also based off of, have you seen the what is it Hulu? The What We Do in the Shadows TV show?
I haven't seen the TV show. I've seen the movie, but I haven't watched the TV show yet.
So the character of Guillermo in What We Do in the Shadows
Okay,
was
I know who the
the
actor is. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, Harvey Guillem was the
Yeah.
visual kind of inspiration for Brody, and then I basically just took that and copy pasted Oscar Wilde's hairstyle onto it.
That's awesome. I love hearing stuff like that in terms of those
Yeah,
little touches and influences that come into it.
yeah.
Kinda w I'm curious, what was the development of the whole, like, story and book? Because this is your debut graphic novel, right?
Yes.
So, from, like, pitch to, like, the whole, like, process really getting it done, like, what does that look like? For our listeners, I'm kinda curious, like, how much time from you pitch to you get to hold the book in your hands? Like, is it
Right.
years?
Yes.
Okay, that's the short
Yes,
answer is
full
yes, years.
stop. Short answer, yes. So, The Ghost Keeper is about 270 pages. I pitched it as, "Oh, it'll probably be 150 to 200 pages," back when I was a sweet summer child who didn't know how long things took and how long the story would end up being. But it was it was a really big undertaking because I was doing the art and the writing.
Yeah,
It ended up being about a year, a little under a year for the writing, and
okay.
most of that was waiting for edits, and that also includes doing the thumbnail pass, which is kind of drawing, but you're basically doing a rough draft of what the pages would look like, kind of like a storyboard style, but for me, I was a glutton for punishment, and I put the text in with my thumbnails just so I could kind of get an idea of how much space I would have with the speech bubbles.
Wait, you didn't, like, just, like, circle and put, like, where you thought the text would be, you actually, like,
Oh,
kinda
I did put circles, but I also put the text in the circles, so I
yeah,
kind
no,
of
you are a glutton for punishment.
Yeah, yeah, I learned very quickly, and I was like, "Oh, no, that's not." Not
Wow.
doing that again. That was a little too much work,
Uh-huh.
but at the time when I got the book deal, I decided I'm just going to completely quit freelance, quit job, quit everything, and just have this comic be my full-time job.
Mhm.
Because, when your first book is gonna be published by Penguin, you're I was really, like I was really wanting to give it my best shot, as it were,
Yeah.
and just kind of wanted to shoot for it, and so I dedicated all of my time, and I lived off of savings for 2 years and the advance, and I just did my very best to make the book work, and so, under those parameters, I it took me about a little under 2 years
Oh,
to
wow.
finish all of the artwork, all of the writing.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, man, I mean, that is, it is quite an undertaking, but
Mhm.
I mean, it's so wonderful. I
Thank
absolutely
you.
loved it. So I was just curious in terms of the timing of it. I mean, for listeners, I think sometimes folks reach out to me and they're like they like to hear, 'cause we read all these comics and sometimes even comics, graphic novels, we read them so fast, and it's like, it takes
Mhm.
so much time, so much effort, so much collaboration to make
Yeah.
these things, but, yeah, it really is a wonderful story, and before we started recording, we were talking about how it's been translated to France, and then you have an upcoming trip that you're taking?
Yes. Yeah, so, Stanky, the one of the big comic publishers in France, they ended up with the rights. They wanted to buy the rights for the French translation of The Ghostkeeper. Which was a huge deal for me because I spent all of my animation and art school education basically devouring French comics, and I was really deeply inspired by the style of a lot of different like, Ulysse Simansong, and, he's the one who did the Kairos graphic novel, and, Guillaume Saint-Gelon was also another big inspiration of mine. He made Frontier, he made PTSD, which if you
Oh,
haven't
okay.
read those, they're fantastic.
No, I've heard of PTSD.
Yes, PTSD is excellent,
Okay,
but I loved a lot of the French animators, French artists, French, comic artists,
okay.
and so I'm super excited that The Ghost Keeper is now in French. And it happened to coincide with the fact that I was accepted to do an artist residency at the Chateau Orquevaux, it's just in the east of France. You go to a chateau for 3 weeks, and you are with a bunch of other artists, and you work on projects, and
Sounds terrible.
I know, it's gonna be terrible.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Yeah, fully catered. Oh, it's the worst.
Oh, that sounds so bad.
Yeah. So while and that happened to overlap with the release of the French edition of The Ghost Keeper, because the French edition came out in January,
Oh, okay.
and my little, residency is gonna be the end of April to about halfway through May. And so I just decided like, "Hey, I'm gonna be in France anyway," and I let my publisher know, and they offered to so I'm gonna be a guest at the Rayon Vert Comic Festival on May 11th, which is really exciting. It's a
That's
small comic
awesome.
festival. Yeah, it's really cool because the whole thing takes place in, like, this little mini castle, which is really cool. So, they were kind enough the people at Edition Jungle are the ones who published The Ghost Keeper in French, and they arranged that for me to be a guest at that convention, and they've arranged about 4 other signings. There's gonna be 1 in Nancy, there's gonna be 2 in Paris, I believe, and then 1 in Chaumont. So, it's been fantastic working with the folks at Jungle because 'cause they've been really wonderful about, like, contacting bookstores and getting everything logistically figured out while I'm over there, and so it'll be kind of like a little mini book tour while I'm over
Now,
while I'm in France.
ha have you ever been before?
Yes, so
Oh,
I
okay.
was so it's interesting because while I was working on the thumbnail pass of I just finished the thumbnail pass of The Ghost Keeper. A friend of mine got into the Fringe Festival in Edinburgh, Scotland. She's a director and actress.
Oh,
Yeah,
awesome.
so that was her debut play.
Oh,
She got accepted to the Fringe Festival, and I was like, "Hey, I'm working on a graphic novel. The artwork is inspired specifically by Edinburgh, Scotland. Can I, like, go see you perform at the Fringe Festival and also use that an excuse to
yeah.
just do a little research trip?"
Right. Plus,
So
it's the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which if
plus it's the
listeners,
Edinburgh Fringe
if you don't know
Festival.
what that is, just Google it, check it out. It's well, it's world renowned, it's well known, and it's
Right, it's
amazing.
basically it's a giant film festival and out like theater festival where a
Yeah,
bunch of
theater.
people got their start,
Yeah.
acting-wise. So, yeah, I went over, I was able to see her play. I spent a lot of time in Edinburgh and took a lot of pictures, just kind of, like, filling up my digital library of, like, references for the artwork. So, like, the town of Rookwood is based directly on Edinburgh. And a
Okay.
lot of the panels in the story I took directly from the oh boy. Hi, Raven. This is Raven. She likes to eat my headphones, so that
Aw.
will probably be happening a lot.
Oh, we don't mind pets. No extra charge for cats in the, video.
Perfect. Perfect. So I was in Edinburgh for a few days, and then I hopped down to London to visit the Victoria and Albert Museum, which has just a bunch of Victorian era furniture and costumes and entire living room space arrangements. And so that was extremely helpful for me in terms of finding references, getting a feel for how I wanted everything to look, and in
Mhm.
the time period that I set the Ghostkeeper in, the fantasy version of, like, 1890s,
Right, yeah.
Scotlandy, Londony, that kind of aesthetic. And while we were over there, my friend and I just grabbed a ticket on the Channel and went over to Paris for a couple days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Fantastic. What a wonderful little
yeah.
trip.
Right, so it was one of those things where we just were thinking, "Ugh, we're here, we might as well. Who knows if we'll ever be able to do this again?" So we just bopped over to France for a while, and I actually got to visit Oscar Wilde's grave.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
I discovered that it was in France the day that I arrived in France, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, I should, like, go visit it." So I just hopped a train. I was just, like, bopping over to Oscar Wilde's grave for a little bit, and I also was able to get a lot of good reference photos for cemeteries and gravestones too. That was the other part of my trip to Edinburgh and London was visiting graveyards, visiting cemeteries, and that kind of thing, and also visiting a lot of bookshops. I took a lot of pictures of bookshops
Yeah.
and, like, shelves.
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, most of it's set in terms of for folks who haven't read it yet, it's set in Brody has a bookshop where, a
Mhm.
good part of it is set, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and cemeteries, but pre-Victorian or older cemeteries, they are, they're much more ornate and there's much
Mhm.
more, statuary than
Yeah.
we would think of like a modern US cemetery, so
Right, and especially in US cemeteries, you just don't see a lot of the ornate, kinda
right.
statuary, monumental, and so that was something that was really helpful for me to visit the cemeteries, especially in Scotland and London and France, because they have some very, very old headstones, and I wanted to really encapsulate that because I just don't get to see that where I live in America.
Yeah.
Especially in the West Coast, most of the you don't get much older than 1800s in
Oh,
the terms of,
yeah.
like, the age of the gravestones, whereas in Scotland and England and France, you're getting, like, 1600s, 1700s, like, and even older than that, depending on where you go, and it's really cool.
Yeah, it is kind of incredible. I've been to Ireland a few times, and it's the same over there, like, yeah, you
Mhm.
don't it's hard to it's hard to, you know, get the concept of how, like, old things are. Like, we
Yeah.
you know, um,
Yeah. We
we
really
don't we
take it
don't
for
have a
gr
lot of old stuff here in the US.
Yeah, not really. And I feel like it's a little bit more normalized over there because they're surrounded by the oldness,
Sure.
but yeah, oh, that was one of the things that I loved the most about visiting Europe was just how old everything was, because it's not the same in America because America is so new in terms of history and in
Yeah.
terms of just, like, stuff that you can trace back and actually, like, see the monument, see the artifacts. It's so cool to see the legacy and the heritage of everything in Europe because it's so old and so well preserved
Yeah. Yeah,
that you
absolutely.
can walk in places and it's like, "Oh my gosh, Shakespeare himself was here," "This is the original building," or even the cathedrals. Just
Oh,
like they worshipped in these same cathedrals in the 16 and 1500s.
yeah.
And it's just that's my favorite part about traveling, honestly, is the experiencing just the oldness.
No, I agree. I felt the same way when I was in, I've been to Ireland, been to Dublin, been to London.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and I agree. It is remarkable. If you I recommend anybody, if you can travel to just, go anywhere, it is really worth it to, see the world a little bit. Um,
Absolutely.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Let's face it, the comics landscape is a mess right now. I'm the editor in chief of a comics journalism outlet, and I can't even keep track of it all. If you are as passionate as I am about indie comics and its creators, you should check out the Lantern Guide. Created on the premise of creating light in the dark, it's going to be the go to resource to keep you up to date on the projects and the creators that you love. Don't take my word for it. I reached out to my friend Brian Lovell, Poison Ivy artist and indie comics creator, to get his take. Brian, what does the Lantern Project fix?
I'm a dude who loves indie comics, and I know personally, like, I get very frustrated when something shows up in my social media timeline or something like that, and I feel like I can't keep track of everything. So, really, the Lantern Project was born out of that. It was an opportunity for me as a reader to kind of like have a place to want to consolidate all the stuff that I wanted to read, all the cool projects from cool creators that seemed interesting and kind of unique to like something that I would like, which is really not super represented everywhere else, but it's all over the indies. Having a spot to go to that felt like it consolidated a lot of those audiences and a lot of those places where I couldn't just get drowned out in the feed of social media was seemed really valuable to me.
What's the ultimate goal?
It's really our hope with this project that creators feel like they're able to get in front of readers and readers are able to get books that they actually want to read with a much easier time of keeping track of them and accessing them.
Catalog is scheduled for a quarterly release, so head over to thelanterncatalog.com to sign up now so you don't miss your next favorite thing. I'll put a link in the show notes for you. Y'all, Jimmy, the Chaos Goblin strikes again. I should have known better than to mention I was working on my DC Universe meets Ravenloft hybrid D&D campaign on social media. My bad. He goes and tags a bunch of comics creators we know, and now I have to get it in gear and whip this campaign into shape so we can start playing. Another friend chimes in, "Are you going to make maps?" It's fair to say it's been a while since I put something together, so I guess? Question mark? It was then that I discovered Arkenforge. If you don't know who Arkenforge is, they have everything you need to make your TTRPG more fun and immersive, allowing you to build, play, and export animated maps, including in-person Fog of War capability that lets your players interact with maps as the adventure unfolds while you, the DM, get the full picture. Now I'm set to easily build high-res animated maps, saving myself precious time and significantly adding nuance to our campaign. That's a win every day in my book. Check them out at arkenforge.com and use the discount code YETI5 to get $5 off. I'll drop a link in the show notes for you, and big thanks to Arkenforge for partnering with our show. I think I'm going to make Jimmy play a Goblin Warlock just to get even. Welcome back.
So a couple of things I wanted to ask, to kind of get back. You had said while you were in school for animation, you read a lot of you know French comics, and I
Mhm.
was kind of curious, what was it that drew you to them? Was it something about the subject matter, the the style? Was there something in particular about French comics as opposed to, US or other European comics, Belgian comics, whatever it might be?
Yeah, I think with French comics, there's something about them that's just effortlessly stylized. I guess they have really, really tight economy of line, and yet their characters are so pushed and so like there's a lot of appeal to the character designs. It doesn't feel like cookie cutter, kind of like, oh, this kind of just looks like anime, this kind of just looks like Disney.
Okay.
It's French artists, like, you can kind of tell a French artist when you encounter them, but for the most part, they have very, very distinct styles from each other, and that's something that's always really fascinated me because I went to school for animation, and a huge part of my studies was in designing for appeal, designing for economy of line, economy of design, with the intent of, creating characters that could move. Because when you've got characters that can move, you can't make them too ornate and too bogged down with too many details, because there are things like you have to consider budgets, you have to consider pipelines, you have to consider, is it gonna be 2D or 3D? And I always loved the simplicity and it's like it's simplicity, but it's also really, like, intentional and planned. There's nothing, like, dumbed down about it. It's
Okay.
just like this it's so hard to describe, but basically, they economize so well, and yet with every stroke, everything is really expressive and really pushed
Yeah.
and exaggerated, and that's something that I really love. And yeah, that just really more so than most influences that I had during school, that was what
Right.
inspired me a lot,
Okay.
because it helped me to kind of normalize breaking out of my comfort zone style-wise because, before you're studying this sort of thing, you tend to think of styles as a shorthand for whether or not it's kid-friendly or not. Like, "Oh, if there's round, cute,
Yeah. Oh, that's
bubbly
interesting.
characters."
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Yeah, you tend to think of like, oh, the Marvel style where you've got the cut angles and the big beefy like
Sure.
superheroes. That's a shortcut, like a shorthand for this is for adults. Or if you've got like the Rick and Morty style where it's kind of like ugly on purpose. And it's like, okay, that's for adults. But if it's cutesy, if it's soft and cuddly and simple, then that's code for it's for kids.
Right.
And I felt like French comic artists tended to break that mold a lot. Like, Guillaume Saint-Gelon is a great example, the guy who wrote, PTSD, and his art style is very cutesy and very round and fun and kind of like almost Adventure Time feely, but
Okay.
not quite that cartoony, but the characters, like, they're addicted to drugs, they're war veterans, they're on the streets, they're dealing with poverty, they're dealing with really heavy subject matter, and the fact that the style is so cutesy doesn't detract from it, it adds to and creates an immersive quality to the story. But,
Yeah.
yeah, I
I'm
I
kind of
love French
fascinated
comics.
by that. That's awesome. No,
Right?
I like to hear
Yeah.
folks talk about what they're passionate about. So, no, that's
It's
great.
incredibly fascinating.
Yeah.
I definitely recommend checking out some French comic artists, and I can send you some examples after the show,
Oh man, I would
but
love that because that
yeah, yeah.
it's especially stuff that's still you know that I have not really been exposed to or haven't had an occasion to seek out. Yeah, I would love to check that out.
Right.
I so I had two other things I definitely wanted to make sure that I covered and asked you about.
Okay.
Back into some of the subject matter of the Ghost Keeper. One of the most uh, poignant or it maybe beautiful sections of the Ghost Keeper is when Dorian is talking to Lucy. And so Lucy is she's a kid, she's a ghost kid, and a very important character, listeners. When you get it and read it, you'll understand. But Dorian is talking to her at one point, and he describes fear, and he talks about the difference between fear being a wolf. I'm gonna have to let me practice saying wolf because my whole family makes fun of me that I say wolf like it's WOOF. That's my
Oh.
Delco accent. So make sure I got it right. Byron, you can leave this in. You can leave it in me struggling to say wolf properly, but there's this beautiful section where he's talking to Lucy about, yeah, fear either being not necessarily being a wolf, but being a crow. And I just thought that was so well written, so beautiful on the page. Um, I I don't I guess I just wanted to ask, like, where did that kind of idea come from? Was that some other I mean, was that something that you had come up with? Was that something that you took from, like, other things that you had heard? Like, it was just I'd never heard fear talked about, like, quite that way. I just thought it was wonderful. So,
Thank you. So that exact analogy didn't necessarily like the using the wolf and the crow specifically
yeah,
were kind of my own imagination, but I
yeah.
did take the core principle of the analogy from something that I learned while I was in therapy. So my therapist at the time, the way he described it, he used a bear as the kind of the predator animal to compare it to, just like, hey, when you see a bear, like what does your body do? What is your mind thinking? And is that because you personally have been attacked by a bear, or is that because you're used to the idea of bears being dangerous and your body's reacting to the idea that the bear might hurt you before it actually does hurt you? And so he was using that as a metaphor to kind of get me to think about the difference between reacting versus responding, where reacting is very passive. You're letting the world kind of happen at you, and you're letting your body and your mind kind of spasmodically take over and not really think the situation through, versus responding, which is an active, like everything you do, every action you take is very deliberate. It's decided ahead of time, and it takes a while to really think it through and actually connect that to the action. Like it's where your thoughts become the action. And that is where the coping really can kick in, because we can be very reactive when we are beset with things that we don't understand, or things that are just like monumental, like grief or tragedy in any form. And so I wanted to kind of take that wisdom and transmute it into something that fit the Victorian framework a little bit more. And that was what led me to Google, are there bears in Scotland? The answer is no, there
No.
are not. And then I was like, "Are there wolves in Scotland?" And the answer is also no, but there were wolves a little bit before the Victorian era, so, like,
Okay.
such that if you mentioned wolves, like, people knew what wolves were, like,
People yeah, they knew
yeah,
what a wolf was, but
they
yeah,
knew what a wolf was.
I just thought that was such a wonderful section and,
Thank you.
a wonderful
Yeah,
way to kinda think about it, and, yeah, it
I
was a very,
appreciate
very,
that.
very beautiful part of the story. Really is probably some out of everything in The Ghostkeeper will probably be the thing that sticks with me, the way Dorian described fear to Lucy. Just thought it was
Thank
very,
you.
very wonderful.
I appreciate that, and I'm glad that that really resonated, because the other thing that I wanted to communicate with that is the fact that fear is a neutral thing, like, it's neither good nor bad. I think we get used to the idea that, like, "Oh, no, don't fear anything, fear is the mind killer, don't engage with
Yeah,
it, you have to not ever experience fear." But in reality, fear depends on what it causes us to do. We can react to it or we can respond to it, but fear is a very natural response. It's a natural, like, emotion that we can feel,
right.
and usually it's just trying to communicate information to us in
Yeah,
a way that we understand, that gets our body to do something, whether that's
yeah.
fight, whether that's flight, whether that's freeze,
Yeah,
the
I mean,
usual.
sometimes fear, can be helpful.
Yeah,
There's, something inside us that tells us that there is, something potentially dangerous about a situation, like you said. So, but yeah,
exactly, and it comes back to the wolf analogy of, is the wolf looking to hurt you personally, is the wolf maybe the wolf isn't hungry, maybe the wolf doesn't see you, but your body experiences the fear anyway, and so it's really important to sit with that and kind of work through the internal logic of where the fear's coming from, giving it space to exist,
Yeah.
and not letting it tie you up and paralyze you, and kind of scare you out of acting.
Okay. Um, the other thing I wanted to talk about before I let you go, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Um, I do not believe in ghosts. I love ghost stories. I don't believe in ghosts. It's not I'm not a ghost believer person. So I
Mhm.
wanted to ask you, working on like the Ghostkeeper, do you have any ghost stories you know, actual real life? You do? You're
It's
shaking your head yes. So
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
do. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's actually funny that you bring this up, like, no one has ever asked me this, and it's really surprising
Really? You read a book
because
called The Ghostkeeper?
yeah, I wrote a book called The Ghostkeeper, yeah. I actually do believe in ghosts.
Okay.
I've had a lot of experiences that have led me to believe that ghosts are real and they can interact with people. In fact, there are a couple of things in The Ghost Keeper, particularly the climax. Like, it without getting into too many specifics, there's something that happens in the climax to Dorian where it's like, I base that off of a similar experience that I had with the paranormal. And it's something it's really, like yeah, it's I don't know, it's hard to describe where I stand because there's a little bit of, like, residual religion behind it, and there's also just kind of, like it's just kind of an instinctive thing, and it's something that's, like, nice to think about for me, like, I think of ghosts not as, like, a malevolent thing, but as something that is just, like, a neutral presence. They can either be evil or good or anywhere in between, but they just kind of coexist. But when I was in Edinburgh doing my research trip, we stayed at an Airbnb that was this old Victorian house, and the Airbnb person told us, "Oh, by the way, the room that you're sleeping in is haunted by the ghost of a man named James, and he's probably gonna rattle the pipes a little bit at 3 AM, so if he does, you just say, 'Go to bed, James,' and and he'll leave you alone." And I was just like, "Oh, okay, haha, isn't this just the vibe?" You know? And me and my
Yeah.
friend and I were just laughing about it. So we go to sleep and we wake up 3 AM. It was about 3 or 3:30 AM. We're woken up to the sound of the pipes getting banged on. And I just kind of blearily, I'm just kinda like, Go to bed, James." And
Did it stop?
it stopped.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that is definitely like and I mean, there are all kinds of explanations for what it could actually have been, but
Sure.
I've always been a believer in the supernatural, especially ghosts, but I think of it as like vampire rules, like the more you seek out dealing with ghosts and the
Right.
more you try to like antagonize them or summon them, that kind of gives them free rein to mess with you, and that's not something that I really want to invite into my life unnecessarily, and so I tend to just kind of leave well enough alone. If people tell me a ghost story, I usually take them at their word of just like, "You know what? I'm not going to tell somebody that a spiritual or ghostly paranormal experience didn't happen to them, the same way that I would expect people not to tell me what I did or didn't experience." So it's more just like I am open to the idea that ghosts absolutely aren't real, but for me, it's something that I have experienced in ways that have convinced me, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean,
But
I'm not like, a debunker. I'm not like,
right.
Harry Houdini who tries to show people that
Sure.
seances and all that stuff, and
Sure, sure.
I love to hear ghost stories. I love 'em. I'm,
Yeah.
and I'm not someone who is like, "Well, excuse me, what that actually was,"
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I love to hear it.
actually, the
Um,
swamp gas of the yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, same. I
Because
love ghost stories.
yeah, I was talking to someone once about, like one of those shows like Ghost Hunters or They filmed an episode of one of those types of shows at Rockwood Museum in Delaware, not too far from where I live, and I've been to Rockwood a bunch of times. Rockwood has a huge history of people seeing ghosts there,
Oh,
and,
fun.
I was talking to someone about, like, they were doing a spend the night thing there, and I would love to do that.
Oh.
I would love they're like, "Wouldn't you be s you're saying you wouldn't be scared?" I'm like, "No, I have the nervous system of a squirrel. I'd be scared of everything, but I would still like to do it." I would, you know?
Oh my gosh.
The
I would probably be like, I like the idea of it, but I think once I got there, I'd be too spooked. 'Cause it's just like, I don't wanna mess with I don't wanna upset the ghosts. I don't know, I just kind of and I'm the same way, like, I've gone on ghost walks before, like, I did a ghost walk in Edinburgh where we went down into
Oh, that had to be
the
awesome.
yeah, we kinda went down into Mary King's Close, the Undercity, which was kinda cool because Edinburgh was kind of built vertically, and so
Right.
there's an entire Undercity that was kinda closed off, especially when the plague hit. They that ended up being like a slum area that they kinda sealed off and quarantined,
Okay.
but so that was really spooky to be able to, like, walk around and kind of point at all the spooky things. I was like, "Oh my goodness, there's a" and I also was in the catacombs at Paris, like,
Oh, okay,
I
yeah,
walked through all the skulls, and that was really cool. Like, I
yeah.
love the idea of ghosts and all of the depth of experience that that implies, like, the reasons people stay behind, the reasons that ghosts might be driven to haunt, and the ways through which people can access
Right.
communicating with ghosts, like, that all is really cool to me, but if it was given to me like, "Hey, there's an evil presence in this room. Okay, go stay the night. It'll be
Yeah,
fun." I'm just like, "No. No,
no,
no, no,
thank
no,
you.
no.
No,
I'm out."
my now well, we my wife and I don't think we were married we weren't married at the time. The first time we went to Ireland and stayed at a friend's farmhouse,
Mhm.
and, she woke up in the middle of the night, and she was like she taught my wife, has had a long history of talking in her sleep and saying just ridiculous stuff or
Oh.
having, like, seeing things that, like, weren't really there. Like,
Mhm.
she she woke up one time and she goes, "There's somebody standing at the foot of our bed." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm awake now. I'm 100% fully awake. I assume she is also awake. She is not. She's still asleep." And I'm like, "Who
Yeah.
who is it? Who's standing at the foot? What do you mean?" I don't see anybody." I'm like, "Who do you think is standing at the foot of our bed?" And she, in like a serious voice with her eyes open, she goes, "Donald Duck." I said, "Okay, well, you go to bed." Go back to bed. But our first night in Ireland, she woke up in a panic, and she was like, "I think somebody's sitting in the chair in the corner of the room." And I said, "No, there's I don't even wanna look because 'cause I'm scared of everything, but
Mhm.
I don't believe in it, but I'm scared of it just in case, you know?" So, I'm like, "There's nobody in the corner of the room." And I'm like the covers, the listeners, you can't see, but I'm like putting my
Oh
fists
my
up, like I'm just like
gosh.
peeking over the covers, and
Yeah.
I'm like, "I don't think I see anything." She goes, "No, there's definitely somebody in the corner of the room." And I'm like, "No, there's nobody there. It's just a pile of clothes. That's probably where I threw, my jacket. I don't that's not a person." And she goes, "Okay, are you sure?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sure it's not a person." And, like, she goes back to bed. So then I'm up the rest of the night. I'm up the rest of the night staring at the corner, making sure it doesn't move,
Oh
making sure I don't see
no.
anything. Wake up the next day, it doesn't look like there was anything on the chair. Maybe it was just a shadow that appeared that way. We come downstairs to breakfast, and the folks we're staying with, they're like, "Did you see the ghost in your room?" And my wife is like, "I'm now not sleeping in that room the rest of the week here." She goes, "What are you talking about?" And then they
Oh.
told us how, like, the farmhouse was haunted and they had a ghost. It's like some old lady that smells bad, and this whole story they had behind it, and my wife is, I think, convinced that she had seen the ghost in the corner, and I didn't do anything about it.
Amazing.
I was like, "What am I gonna do?"
How
But
dare you?
yeah,
How dare
she
you?
did, like, she didn't it was a struggle. We had to, like, rearrange furniture in order and, like, move the chair out of the room in order for her to
Oh
sleep
my
in the room in the
gosh.
farmhouse the rest of the night. So, I don't know, maybe I should believe
Oh
more because
gosh,
it seems like
that's funny.
we might have
Well,
had
it's all
a haunting, but
subjective.
yeah.
It's subjective, right? Like, that's so funny.
But, yeah, just to get back to, go from Ghost to the Ghostkeeper, I really just think it's an absolutely wonderful graphic novel. I love your art.
Thank
Micah
you.
Myers letters it incredibly,
Mhm.
and just what a I mean, it's a very fun, engaging story, but what a wonderful way to have some of these conversations, especially with younger people that are gonna read it about, you know, not just mental health, but grief and loss. There's so many really what we think of as like heavy topics that
Yeah,
I think you handle in uh a very interesting way, a very smart way, a very um, um, um a way that it, it gets it easy. It's easy to talk to because the parallels, using the idea of the ghosts, it makes, a lot of sense to be able to talk about some of these things. And especially about being a caregiver or about being somebody who tries to do everything themselves, about taking on too much, about, burnout. Like
right.
you know, I mean, this could be a perfect analogy to what we think of in comics as like the freelancer's lifestyle. Like every time that conversation comes up, like you gotta grind, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, you gotta
Mhm.
sacrifice your health if you want it bad enough. And it's like then there's it's
Yeah,
not
it's
great.
it's pervasive. It's pervasive, and it's hard because what we were talking about before, comics is something that you don't really think about the work that goes into it because they're so easy to digest
Yeah.
and so easy to consume that it's like you can read a graphic novel in 2, 3 hours tops,
Yeah, sure.
depending on how long it is and whether it's for kids or for more like the YA adult audience. But there's a lot of work that goes into it. And especially if you're writing and drawing it all yourself, you're kind of having to play 4D chess with yourself to really make sure everything works because you're having to thumbnail it all, you're having to write the script, and then you have to think about even the words that you choose because your words are eventually going to have to fit into speech bubbles, and those speech bubbles are going to cover up some art.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you have to think about where you're placing your panels, where your characters are taking up space in the panels, and the size of words that you use so they're not too long, so that the speech bubbles don't cover up too much of the artwork. There's a lot of things that you have to think about when you're making comics that don't really come up in other disciplines. And it's really unfortunate because comics is chronically underpaid and underfunded.
Yes.
And for how much work goes into creating the final product, and honestly, it's a miracle that graphic novels get made at all because there's so many moving parts, and there's so many points at which things can go wrong, things don't work out, things fall behind, and so anytime you see a comic book on a shelf, that's kind of a mini miracle of
Yeah.
just a collaboration of human creativity, human ingenuity, and arranging all the pieces so that the end result is satisfying and delivers a narrative that's coherent for one and strong for another.
Right.
And so that kind of jump started an obsession in me and a fixation on comics because the more I was reading and researching how to do comics, the more I realized, oh my gosh, this is so much work. This is just, I can't believe that people make comics.
Yeah. And now you've made a really, really great one, you know?
Thank
So,
you.
yeah,
I appreciate that, Jimmy.
no, I appreciate you doing it. I absolutely love reading it. I'm gonna make sure that, I appreciate you sending the copy, but I'm gonna make sure I buy a copy because I want my 12-year-old to read it so we can talk about it. Then my other daughter,
Awesome.
when she's a little bit older, she's 7 now, but, I also wanted to let listeners know, you have a story in Wish Upon a Star, the Limit Break anthology. We love
Yeah.
Limit Break at Comic Book Yeti. I got to meet I was at Dublin Comic Con last year with my brother to celebrate my birthday and happened to run into and see, Paul Carroll and some of the
Yeah.
other Gary
Yeah.
Maloney and some of the other Limit Break guys, so, that's awesome. Their anthologies are I don't have anything bad to say about 'em, other than
Mhm.
they have rejected all my pitches, until the most recent one. So, but I give them a hard time. But no, they
Wait,
always
are you in Wish Upon a Star too?
no, I'm not in Wish Upon a Star. I'm in the one they just recently announced for, Bump in the Night, their cryptid one.
Oh. Oh, congrats. That's
Oh, thank
awesome.
you. Yeah, I'm very excited about it. I'm working with, some really great folks. Sam Wise and, Rob Jones is gonna let her. Um
Oh, ah, that's awesome. I
Yeah,
love that.
so but yeah, I pitched a Wish Upon a Star,
Mhm.
but I'm very excited to actually read all the stories in it, because they always do a fantastic job. I all
Mhm.
their other anthologies before then, um, the Down Below and
Mhm.
Forgotten Realms, they've done a couple. But you have a
Mhm.
story in Wish Upon a Star, so if anyone has I think I don't know if I think the digital one was just released recently. I don't know if they've sent the print ones out yet. Um
Yeah, the print ones are actually going out. We got an email about it this week
oh, okay.
that they're starting to ship
Nice.
the physical copies.
Well, if you back that, then you'll, and, Johanna has a story in that, so you'll be able to read
Yes, I
her
do.
story in that one, and they
Yeah.
usually, I think, sell them afterwards on the Limit Break website, but also you
Mhm.
have a story in another anthology, the Museum of the Uncanny. I think I got the title right?
Yes.
And that's gonna be going
Yeah.
to Kickstarter soon, right?
Yeah, so Museum of the Uncanny, it's coming out from Very Big Comics, which is another a similar indie outfit. They're gonna be publishing the Kickstarter on April 8th,
Nice.
so
Okay.
that is coming up. But it's basically gonna be a Twilight Zone-ish flavored, like, it takes place in a museum where you get to see all of these artifacts and you get to hear the stories behind these mysterious artifacts, and we all kinda got to pitch what the artifact was and then, like, do a short comic about it, and so I'm doing the artwork for the story that CJ Leo, wrote, and it's called Spooky Action at a Distance. And it's about, like, these pair of dice that determine the fate of the universe, and it's really fun sci-fi kind of it's kind of got, like, a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy type tone to
Okay.
it.
Oh, I love Hitchhiker's Guide.
Yeah, yeah. So, our story is very Hitchhiker's Guide flavored, but
Oh,
the rest of the
fantastic.
comics yeah, the rest of the comics are gonna be really, really, really cool. So, I highly recommend checking out Museum of the Uncanny, their Kickstarter on April 8th. I'm also in another anthology. I'm in the Sami Dune Comics for a Free Palestine,
Yeah, I was just gonna
anthology.
mention that. I saw your
Yeah.
name associated with that too. So yeah,
Yeah,
fantastic. I
yeah.
mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, so
I
that's a
mean,
charity fundraiser
yeah.
for, the ongoing conflict in Palestine and raising money for the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, which is delivering aid and healthcare to the people who are stuck in Gaza. So, definitely check that out. It's got a lot of really incredible stories and it spotlights, specifically Palestinian and Gazan, comic creators.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make sure to put a link to everything in the show notes for our listeners to check out.
Awesome.
Um, yeah, that's yeah, the Sami Dune one.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's like a 64, I think it's about like a 64 page collection. But yeah, some of the creators in that, I think Dave um
Yeah,
Marriott, I'm not
Dave
sure how to say
Dave
his last name.
Marriott, yeah.
Marriott, yeah, I think the kind of was,
Mhm.
I guess the publisher or kind of putting that together. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I'll put links to everything in the show notes and also, to your website and social media so folks can find you and so they can get a copy of The Ghost Keeper. But, Joanna, this was phenomenal. I have so much fun
Thank you.
in France and in your residency, and
Yeah.
yeah, if any of our listeners speak French, maybe go and try and track down a copy of the French translation of the Ghost Keeper. That would be pretty cool.
Yes, if any listeners for Comic Book Yeti and Cryptid Creator Podcast, if any of you live in France and are going to be around the Paris area or within the region of Eastern France or can reasonably travel to Paris, please come to my signings. Check me out on Blue Sky. I will post so much about all of my events happening in Paris, and I would love to be able to connect with you guys.
Well, that's awesome. I hope you have a wonderful time. Yeah, listeners, it's The Ghostkeeper. It is absolutely a fantastic graphic novel. Please check it out. Shout out to my brother Bobby, as always, the Cryptid Creator Corner's #1 most dedicated fan. Bobby listens to all my episodes, and Johanna, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been wonderful. And I'm a devotee of the Ghostkeeper now. I will
Oh,
spread
thank you.
the gospel of the Ghostkeeper. I just thought it was just a wonderful story. And you know, I wish it in another life I could pull off some of Dorian's outfits because I really like the design of this too.
You and me both. You and me both.
All right. Well, listeners, thank you so much for listening. You can find me on Blue Sky or TikTok or the Comic Book Yeti Cryptic Creator Corner website. Let me know what it is you're reading, especially if you go and get a copy and read The Ghostkeeper. So for Comic Book Yeti, I'm Jimmy Gasparo. My guest today has been Johanna Taylor. Thank you. Good night, and I will see you next time.
This is Byron O'Neill, one of your hosts of the Cryptid Creator Corner, brought to you by Comic Book Yeti. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of our podcast. Please rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. It lets us know how we're doing, and more importantly, how we can improve. Thanks for listening.